Discover the incredible truth from the kitchen changes everything forever. Sarah stood in her tiny kitchen, rain pattering against the window, matched only by the frantic beating of her heart. Tonight was about her grandmother's gumbo, the recipe that had danced through generations. It was more than just a dish. It was a fragment of hope against a backdrop of relentless financial struggle. But now it felt tainted. A comment, an anonymous jab from a local food critic, home cooking, echoed in her mind like an uninvited ghost. She stirred the pot, feeling the weight of each spice, a reminder that her culinary dreams had always teetered on the edge of being solely home. The kitchen was cluttered, the air thick with vulnerability. While she juggled shifts at the diner and the grocery store, the doubt about her aspirations slinked into her subconscious like a malevolent shadow. She inhaled, trying to filter out the anxiety, reminding herself of the late-night classes pushed through with fierce determination. But here she was again, battling the illusion of inadequacy, feeling every bit the imposter. It was maddening, simmering, much like the dish she prepared. She could hear her grandmother's voice, an encouraging lull against the chaos of self-doubt. But could she rise to the expectations strung by a world too often quick to dismiss? Her fingers tightened around the wooden spoon, knuckles white, as she wrestled with the desire for recognition against the fear of conformity looming ahead. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But now, an old recipe book discovered in the attic brought a flicker of light. Its crinkled pages were laced with stains and laughter woven through her family's history. It whispered truths about love and resilience that had been lost beneath the weight of survival. Each recipe was a bridge to her roots, yet equally a reminder of the chasm to be crossed toward her dreams. A flame ignited as she began sharing her dishes online, her journey becoming entwined with faces and stories craving authenticity. With every post, the tension escalated. The community's response was a mixture of applause and disbelief. Who was this single mother from Missouri with her desire to break free? And then, the prestigious local restaurant owner's offer fell into her lap like a tempting, gilded cage. Yet, the excitement was pierced by apprehension. Would she have to compromise her voice under the chef's regimented rules? Each tick of the clock dragged her toward a decision. A choice between dreams and the suffocating grip of restrictions. The stress twisted in her stomach, limbs heavy with doubt. As days blurred into nights, Sarah felt the urgency rise. Would she stand in front of the critic and defend her narrative? Each moment of choice weighed down upon her, blending desperation with the spark of determination. Would she allow her culinary heritage to speak, or let dry culinary expectations muffle it? Standing poised on a precipice of authenticity, she felt her choices spiral. What does it mean to truly succeed? As she prepared for the tasting event, her heart raced with anguish. The critic's condescension snaked through her mind, a reminder that the battle wasn't just about the dish, it was about her identity. In that charged atmosphere where every stare bore into her, she prepared to reveal a truth that could change everything. The moment approached, and her future hung in the balance. Would she be bold enough to challenge expectations forged by others, or would fear lock her into a shadow? The reality was stark. This was only the beginning. The lights dimmed in the tasting room, shadows dancing across the polished floors, as Sarah drew a deep breath, the scent of her grandmother's gumbo wafting around her like a comforting embrace. She leaned against the counter, feeling its coolness seep into her palms, an anchor amid a storm of emotions. If this were to be her moment of truth, she needed to claim it. This was her culinary voice demanding to be heard. As the critic approached, Sarah's mind raced. How much weight could she bear? The confidence she cultivated through late-night classes and her honest posts on social media had begun to wither under the scrutiny of professional expectation. Home cooking. To the world, it was filed away beneath artifice and glamour. Yet to her, it represented something raw and deeply personal. Each pot stirred carried the history of generations, and in this room, she sought validation for that very truth. Her hands trembled slightly. Should she shy away, allow the weight of traditional standards to crush her spirit? Or should she lift her chin, letting her heritage shine through? The decision crystallized, infused with inflammatory passion. This was the moment she had been formulated for, the culmination of every tear and every triumph. You know, the critic began in a deliberately casual tone. I find that many home cooks can't seem to transition into professional environments. They lose their touch the moment they step outside their kitchens. The sting of condescension bit into her like an ash, but she refused to flinch. This was not merely about the dish. It was a stand against an entire framework. What defines home cooking? Her voice rang out, more steady than she felt. What if it's precisely those roots that offer something different, authenticity amid mimicry? My grandmother's gumbo is about love, family, and legacy. It's my identity on a plate. She met his gaze, determination flooding her veins like an adrenaline shot. The room froze for a moment, the vibrant conversations spiraling into a vacuum as she laid bare her conviction. Would he recognize that authenticity demands bravery? It was more than just ingredients. It held the weight of obligation, the obligation to cook, to care, to express. The critic's brows furrowed, perhaps questioning the portrait she painted, perhaps grasping the raw sincerity in her words. She had put her heart into that pot, infused it with her struggles, and it wasn't just a meal. It was a manifestation of everything she'd fought against. The room now buzzed again, whispers of curiosity running through the kitchen brigade. As the gumbo swirled in its bowl, colorful and fragrant, it was no longer just a recipe. It became a damning challenge against culinary elitism. This was not just cooking. This was her declaration. Sarah prepared her first spoonful, holding the ladle poised before the critic. She could feel the air crackle with tension. It was a moment steeped in anticipation, one that might transform everything. But uncertainty clawed at her. What if he brought it all crashing down? What if the critique had roots deeper than her tenacity, an inability to embrace the essence of her cooking? She felt herself teetering at the edge of her possible future, the potential for acclaim or near failure lying before her in vivid hues. Would she emerge stronger from this confrontation, or would the fear of rejection consume her? In that moment, another voice, her own, echoed within her. What had she uncovered so far? The real value of her journey rested not in the approval of others, but in her unyielding heritage and courage to stand tall against the tide of norms. As she tilted the spoon toward him, eyes unwavering, she pondered, could the flavors hold the power to change perceptions? With every heartbeat, she willed her soul into that dish, preparing to face the ultimate judgment head-on. But the weight of the spoon lingered, and the critic looked at her curiously. Would he understand? Sarah's heart raced. The revelation awaited. The moment of truth was upon her. Would she conquer her fears and let her voice emerge, revealing the chef she was destined to become? Time seemed to stretch, elongating the seconds as Sarah held her breath. The critic's gaze weighed heavily on her, a pendulum of judgment swinging between them. She closed her eyes, calling on the memories of her grandmother stirring that pot over the stove, the warmth of their kitchen, and echoes of laughter warming the walls. Would the flavors reflect that love? As she plunged the spoon into the vibrant gumbo, her grip tightened. This was the nexus of her fears and desires, ambition and heritage. She scooped a generous serving and brought it to her lips, but at the last instant, she hesitated. This was not merely a taste for him. It was her voice, her legacy, sealed in a broth of spices and tradition. Uncertainty nagged at her, twisting the lines of her. What if it's not enough, she thought, a momentary wave of doubt crashing over her. Could she truly risk everything on this one meal? Did she take the risk to be vulnerable, exposing herself to the possibility of great failure? Sarah opened her eyes, determined. This dish was not about impressing the critic. It was about honoring her journey, the kitchens where she had learned what it meant to cook with heart. It was time to dismantle the barriers of expectation surrounding home cooking. She steadied her breath, a blend of anxiety and fortitude swirling together. With resolve, she thrust the spoonful toward the critic. The moments that transpired felt electric, charged with the weight of her culinary dreams. As he accepted the spoon, the room hushed, every eye pinned on the critic's face. Hers was a universe unfolding in a single inhalation of time. He brought the gumbo to his lips, pausing as he savored the moment. Sarah's heart pounded with each tick of the clock. Seconds morphed into hours. What if he failed to grasp the story encapsulated within the dish? She clenched her fists, almost pleading with the universe for understanding, for recognition. Finally, the critic swallowed and closed his eyes. A flicker of something unguarded crossed his expression, a fleeting moment where she dared to hope that he had welcomed the spirit behind the dish. Did he taste the essence, the unabashed passion she had poured into it? When he finally spoke, his voice cracked slightly. This is unexpected," he said slowly, and her heart plummeted. What would follow? She mentally braced for a repudiation. "But I see what you've done here," he continued, opening his eyes to meet hers. "You've crafted a story, a narrative some chefs forget in pursuit of perfection. You've shown that tradition holds power, that there's strength in vulnerability." Relief rushed through Sarah, but before she could bask in it, he furrowed his brow. "However," he added, the slight hesitation causing her stomach to drop, "can you replicate this experience under pressure?" His words hit her hard, an echo of the anxiety she thought she'd overcome. Replicate it. Faced with this challenge, her fervor morphed into a steely determination. This was not just about a single dish. It was an exploration of who she could become, a proving ground for her talent. As he continued to evaluate, Sarah felt a shift within herself. The competition was not just a threat. It became a catalyst, an invitation to rise. Instead of becoming immobilized by fear, she felt that familiar pulse of creativity, a rush to innovate, expand her skill set outside her comfort zone. With a newfound clarity blossoming inside her, Sarah realized it wasn't only about the critic's acceptance, or even the accolades that might follow. It was about embracing the growth opportunities outside her familiar boundaries. This was a pathway to her evolution, who she was meant to become as a chef. Emerging from her self-doubt, she began to strategize. She'd adapt, evolve, transform her cooking. She would face whatever came next armed with her heritage, blending it with new techniques, daring to venture beyond the recipes that rooted her. The critic nodded as if reading her thoughts. "I look forward to seeing how you rise to this challenge." His words rang like a bell, igniting a fire in her spirit. A challenge had been set before her, a need to create under scrutiny, to prove herself repeatedly. But with each challenge, she would not retreat. She would step forward, reclaiming her narrative. This growing fire lit an insatiable hunger within her. But amidst this fervor, a creeping disquiet lingered, whispering questions. Was she truly ready to embrace this shift? Could she balance the heart of home cooking with the rigors of a professional kitchen? As she contemplated her next steps, she sensed a storm gathering on the horizon. Was she prepared for the consequences of transformation? The next level awaited, but could she withstand the pressure? The journey had only just begun. The next few days manifested as a whirlwind of lessons and inspiration. Sarah immersed herself in the world of culinary literature, poring over books that dissected the art of execution under pressure. The kitchen, once a sanctuary that echoed her grandmother's wisdom, now felt like an arena where every ingredient represented a battle with her own capabilities. She found strength in studying techniques that hovered just beyond her grasp, gripping her notebook as thoughts spilled onto the pages, a haven made from notes, sketches, and aspirations. She understood that replicating the gumbo under scrutiny required more than precision. It demanded a new approach to her craft. Each evening, with the sun dipping below the horizon, she charged herself with the task of creating. Innovating based on her grandmother's flavors, she began to intertwine modern techniques with traditions that had shaped her palate. The rhythmic sound of the knife cutting through vegetables became a mantra, a reassurance of progress. However, self-doubt often crept into that sanctuary. As she fumbled through recipes, she would occasionally stop and question if she had declared war on her own roots by experimenting too much. It became a mental tug-of-war. The very essence of cooking, her heritage, clashed with the burgeoning necessity to innovate. The echoes of laughter in her kitchen transformed into reminders of risk. Was she betraying her past? Or was this evolution an homage to the flavors she had always embraced? In moments of hesitation, she'd think back to the critic's gaze, the weight of expectation he had subtly placed upon her shoulders. Can you replicate this experience under pressure? The question gnawed at her, igniting an impatience that demanded action. There was little room for mediocrity in culinary arts, and that truth resonated within the core of who she was striving to become. Each failed attempt served as a valuable lesson. She harnessed the pain of disappointment to fuel her creativity, revisiting her foundation with newfound clarity. Layering flavors became an exploration, an experiment in what could define her narrative in this dynamic world. Every taste was a discovery, every plate an opportunity for reflection. Through her trials, she started to uncover hidden talents she never recognized, such as the natural ability to blend the unexpected while still honoring tradition. Her circle of friends offered encouragement, sampling her latest dishes without judgment. They became her soft place to fall amidst her relentless pursuit of culinary mastery. Their laughter felt more genuine as they shared plates inspired by deconstructed recipes from her childhood. Sarah's heart warmed each time they complimented her experiments, providing a counterweight to her internal doubts. There came a day when she realized what truly mattered was not the critics' approval, but her growth. The idea of success morphed from mere recognition to a sense of satisfaction she derived from her creation process. The kitchen transformed again, becoming a sacred ground where her vulnerability sparked creativity. As she prepared for yet another evening of testing her gumbo variation, she paused. This wasn't about perfection, it was about her journey, her voice. She took a deep breath, allowing the potent aroma of spices to envelop her, fueling her resolve. Could she face the critic again, this time with the confidence of someone who understood her journey more deeply? Would he appreciate the richness in her evolution as much as the dish? The time had come to face him again, to stand assuredly under the weight of his gaze. But was she ready to showcase the new chapter of her culinary story? The answers lingered, just out of reach, as doubts bubbled beneath the surface. She knew one thing: the pressure was rising, and she must meet it head-on. The moment to truly embrace who she had become was upon her, a fork in the road that might lead her to inevitable revelation or irrevocable failure. With newfound purpose, she set her mise en place, each ingredient an embodiment of her effort, each slice a step closer to unveiling the powerful truth that had formed in her kitchen. Uncertainty loomed, but she was prepared to rise or stumble. The stakes were higher now than ever before. Would her voice resonate or fade away? The next step would test not just her culinary skills, but her very identity. As Sarah arranged her workstation, a tangle of emotions surged within her, each frantic heartbeat echoing the urgency of the moment. She could still hear the critic's biting remarks in her mind, laced with the challenge of innovation. Yet something had shifted. The sting of his skepticism had transformed into motivation, a fire that now warmed her spirit instead of freezing her resolve. The weight of expectation hung like a fog over her kitchen, sticky and oppressive. She paced, nervously glancing at the clock. Time felt both an enemy and ally as it ticked away towards her radiant moment of truth. With each deliberate chop and simmering pot, she embraced her journey, not merely as a chef, but as this was her narrative, a tapestry woven from her roots, interlaced with the contemporary elements of culinary innovation. In the midst of this tension, she acknowledged her fear of regression. What if this new gumbo failed to connect with the essence of her grandmother's recipe? Would she be discounting a legacy that held more than just ingredients? That moral dilemma intertwined with her ambition, igniting a deeper introspection. By questioning the authenticity of her creation, she stood at the threshold of self-doubt and self-acclamation, urging herself to answer honestly. Did she dare redefine tradition, or was she merely a misfit in her own lore? She took a moment, closing her eyes and breathing in the fragrant blend of spices. It centered her amid the chaos of thought, concerting her resolve like the tuning of an instrument before a grand performance. Her culinary journey wasn't just about recreating a dish, it was about exploring her identity through every fragrant note of flavor. With renewed determination, Sarah set about her task. The ingredients, vibrant and fresh, seemed to pulse with potential. Each toss of the spoon was not just for taste, but for distilling the essence of who she had become. She skillfully navigated the familiar territory of her grandmother's recipes while beckoning new techniques forward. A dash of this, a pinch of that, each measure fostering a daring alchemy that danced on the edge of tradition and invention. Emboldened by her newfound approach, Sarah yearned for feedback that would go beyond mere compliments, a confirmation that she had ventured beyond safety into the realm of risk. Her friends, once simply supportive, now embodied a critical audience she craved, their laughter and joy an essential component in the final moments of her culinary evolution. "Sarah, come on, we want to taste that creation," one of her friends called, breaking her reverie. The calling pierced through her moment of contemplation, grounding her back in the reality of the kitchen. Just then, the doorbell rang. The sound echoed through the air, and her heart raced. Was it him? The critic? The thought sent a chill along her spine. She was not entirely convinced she felt ready, but the reality of the moment drew her forward. "Showtime," she murmured under her breath, wiping her hands on her apron as she approached the door. As she opened it, anticipation rippling through her veins, she encountered not just her friend, but looming uncertainty, a looming confrontation that could solidify or shatter her aspirations. Was she ready to put everything she had poured into her cooking on display for judgment? The critic stood before her, curiosity etched on his face as he stepped into the kitchen. The tension thickened. This was the moment she had prepared for, but now it felt like an execution rather than a celebration. Would she articulate her journey through the dish successfully, or would the fear of judgment swallow her whole? The time had come to unveil her truth, not just about food, but about who she was becoming. As Sarah stood frozen by the door, uncertainty clashed within her, a tempest swirling between potential triumph and paralyzing fear. The critic stepped inside, surveying the kitchen with a mixture of curiosity and skepticism. Every detail that once felt comforting flickered under the intensity of his gaze. This was no longer merely her workspace. It had transformed into an arena where she would either thrive or succumb to the weight of expectations. "Smells incredible in here," he said, his tone light yet layered with unspoken criticism. "What are we making today?" She felt a tightening in her chest as she met his penetrating stare. "A gumbo," she replied, attempting to infuse confidence into her voice. "It's a twist on my grandmother's recipe. I'm incorporating some unexpected ingredients." The critic raised an eyebrow, as if daring her to elaborate. In that moment, her vulnerability ignited a deeper realization within her. This was more than just a culinary challenge. It mirrored her struggle with identity and innovation. Here stood an opportunity to reshape the narrative of her past, to redefine what it meant to honor her heritage while carving a path forward. She could teach him something he didn't know about tradition and change. "Unexpected?" he probed with skepticism. "Care to share what those ingredients are?" Sarah swallowed hard, grappling with the weightiness of her choices. "I've added roasted bell peppers and a blend of spices inspired by my travels," she ventured, pushing the envelope of both her cooking and her own boundaries. Could she just throw the words out there and let her culinary spirit resonate? The critic nodded, jotting notes while his gaze flickered to the simmering pot. She could feel the gears turning in his mind. Had she piqued his interest or simply deepened his doubt? Taking a steadying breath, Sarah turned back to the stove, taking in the vibrant colors swirling in the bubbling pot of gumbo. Each ingredient represented her journey, her tribulations, and her aspirations. She had to remember the spirit of her grandmother as she stirred, honoring the past while pushing forward with her own flair. Time dissolved into the rhythm of chopping, stirring, and seasoning, yet the critic's presence hovered like an uninvited guest that refused to make himself comfortable. She focused. The kitchen became both her sanctuary and battleground. Each decision held weight, every flavor a point to prove. While she continued to work, she found a second wind. A surge of determination coursed through her. What if this was far more than just a dish? What if it served as an invitation for dialogue between generations, all through the medium of flavor and aroma? As the gumbo neared readiness, Sarah plated it with a careful precision. The moment felt both monumental and intimate. Each twist of her wrist was a reflection not just of her abilities, but of her growth and her willingness to engage with the critic's opinions, even the prickly ones. "Here goes nothing," she muttered to herself, finally allowing herself to step away from the safety of her thoughts and present the dish in front of him. The apprehension morphed into a cocktail of adrenaline and hope as she offered the bowl, her heart suspended in the balance of anticipation. With a slow, deliberate motion, the critic took his first bite. Time slowed as she leaned against the counter, holding her breath. Would this be a validation of her efforts or a deflating critique? This single moment would define not just the dish, but also her place in the culinary world and, ultimately, in her own life. The critic's expression remained inscrutable. It was evident that every chew weighed heavily in deliberation. And with that tension hanging thick in the air, a singular thought anchored Sarah. Had she truly taken the leap of faith needed to emerge as the chef she aspired to be? Or was she still entangled in the shadows of others' expectations? There it was, the potential for revelation, but it came at a price. What would his verdict be? As Sarah watched the critic chew, her heart thundered in her chest. She felt as if the walls of the kitchen were constricting around her, the very air thickened by anticipation. It was surreal. A single dish could hold all her insecurities, aspirations, and entangled family legacies, backlit by the glow of a simmering pot. The critic's traditionally stoic demeanor held an unsettling authority, magnifying everything about this moment. Then, finally, he set the bowl down gently. Seconds stretched into an eternity as he composed his thoughts, an activity she had never associated with someone so renowned. "This is interesting," he said slowly, each word seeming to weigh down the air. "The flavors are layered, and yet I wonder, did you hold back?" Her stomach dropped. It felt like a knife jabbing at her resolve. Had she not delivered enough? "Does it lack something?" she challenged, her voice barely above a whisper, but laced with a brittle edge. The criticism felt sharp, a reflection more of her inner dialogue than his words. The question hung there, suspended in communal discomfort. The critic's eyes softened slightly, and for a brief moment, it seemed he veered away from the role of the merciless evaluator. "It's not about lack," he said, leaning back slightly. "This reflects your journey, raw, honest. But gumbo is a celebration. It asks for a more vibrant voice, a bolder risk." His words were like a harsh wind over her fire, and Sarah's mind spun. Bolder? It beckoned her to uncover the deeper layers of her confidence and shed the insecurity she often defaulted to in his presence. Had she been so afraid of failure that she'd unknowingly played it safe? Was her desire to honor her grandmother's legacy somehow stifling her own? Her hands trembled. Deep within her, a flicker of resilience ignited. "What if I added a splash of citrus, some fresh herbs right at the end?" she posed suddenly, her mind racing. "And maybe a hint of heat, something unexpected to elevate the flavors." A smile broke through the critic's stoic demeanor. "Now that sounds like a commitment to authenticity," he replied, an approving glint in his eye. Each adjustment Sarah suggested felt like she was layering her vision with the foundation of her inheritance, deliberate, fearless. She filled her lungs, inhaling deeply, savoring her own resolve. The kitchen transformed. The space felt electric, soaked in possibilities. She moved swiftly, slicing fresh herbs and zesting a lemon, adrenaline propelling her forward as she orchestrated these new additions. Each action stirred not just the pot, but also her identity as a chef. The renewal of her focus sparked a conviction. This wasn't merely about a recipe. It signified her personal evolution, the assertion of her voice in the artistic symphony of cooking. As she threw those vibrant ingredients into the pot, she let go of her anxieties, recognizing that innovation was as much a part of her heritage as tradition. Sarah's confidence soared with each minute spent recalibrating the dish. It was still hers, but now it carried more than nostalgia. She infused it with courage, creating a dialogue that bridged past and present. It was a celebration of her heritage, her individuality, and yet a challenge to rise beyond the walls built from doubt. When she finally plated the dish again, a swirling storm of colors and textures erupted off the plate. She hesitated for a heartbeat, allowing herself to relish the moment of creation. This was a culmination of all that she had embarked upon, a testimony of her growth both personally and professionally. Facing the critic once more with the new plate set before him, she met his gaze directly, her own eyes ablaze with an intensity that stemmed from her newfound clarity. This was more than a test. It was a declaration. The critic lifted his fork, poised, but before he could take another bite, she leaned in. "Tell me, does this speak of my evolution as a chef?" The question lingered heavily in the air, and as he prepared to taste once more, anticipation morphed into a new uncertainty. Would she receive affirmation or face even deeper criticism? Either way, she knew one truth. She was finally beginning to embrace the chef she was meant to be. To her surprise, he hesitated, eyeing the dish with apparent reverence, his expression hinting at something transformative. Then he spoke. His verdict would hold weight, sending ripples of both fear and hope across Sarah's heart. What would he uncover in this act of tasting that could redefine her journey? As the fork descended towards the dish, Sarah's heartbeat quickened, her mind racing through scenarios. What if he loved it? What if he panned her still? She felt the weight of her grandmother's expectations, her family legacy tangling in knots inside her. It was more than culinary validation. This moment symbolized her struggle between honoring the past and embracing her own artistic freedom. The critic lifted a sample of the revamped gumbo, his fork glistening under the soft kitchen lights. She noticed the way his brow furrowed slightly. It was a telltale sign that he was genuinely engaging with the dish. Would he recognize the nuances she deliberately infused? Would he understand that with each bold addition, she had peeled back layers of herself, even those she had been hesitant to reveal? As he took the first bite, the kitchen fell into a breathless silence, time suspended in his act of tasting. In that instant, she was acutely aware of every ingredient she had selected: the tang of the citrus zest, the aroma of fresh herbs, the heat that now danced on the palate. They weren't just flavors, they were pieces of her evolution, her narrative intertwined with the dish itself. His expression shifted, the lines of criticism wavering momentarily. "Ah," he exhaled, as if a realization dawned upon him. For a fleeting second, it seemed the tension in the room transformed into a shared experience, a moment where artist and evaluator transcended their distinct roles. Then his fork paused, and she held her breath, caught in limbo. "This," he said finally, "shifts your narrative. You've embraced what your heritage can evolve into. It represents growth, a triumph in flavor and spirit." A wave of emotion swept over Sarah. The words were validation, an affirmation of the risks she had taken. She felt a wellspring of pride swell within, pushing against the doubt that had clouded her vision for so long. This dish, with its new character, was not just a representation of her skills, it encapsulated the journey of self-discovery that she had been grappling with. Yet, under the surface of her elation, an unsettling urge began to stir. Did this validation mean she was ready to embrace her future? Or would complacency creep in, urging her to stay safe amidst her success? As the critic continued his assessment, she mulled over the implications of his praise. It was thrilling to be recognized, but the path forward felt daunting. Would she be able to keep pushing her boundaries, seeking that vibrant expression each time she plated a new dish? Each triumph would only raise the stakes, demanding even greater risks with each subsequent creation. Suddenly, the critic looked her in the eye, his expression a mix of seriousness and encouragement. "You have to continue to challenge yourself, Sarah. Don't let fear dictate your artistry. Ask yourself, how can you evolve further from here?" His voice resonated, a challenge that set her nerves alight. "Bolder flavors, clever combinations, that's what you might consider next," he added, concluding his thoughts. The words resonated deep within her, stirring an urge not only to innovate, but to confront her own apprehensions about experimenting without restraint. Could she truly embrace the possibility of failure as a catalyst for growth? As she reflected, the kitchen atmosphere began to morph once again. What lay ahead was more than just culinary curiosity. It was an exploration of her own aspirations. She felt the flicker of ambition igniting, promising a future of endless exploration, of dishes not just composed, but deeply felt. But amidst her eagerness, a nagging doubt crept back. She would need to confront her insecurities directly, face the voice whispering warnings of inadequacy that had always loomed large. This was not just a culinary challenge, it was intrinsically tied to her identity. Float toward the edge of this bold new endeavor, Sarah understood now. The moment she would rise to confront herself in a way she never had before was rapidly approaching. She could no longer remain within the comforting confines of tradition. Taking a decisive breath, she wondered what her next move would be. Inspiration thrummed through her veins, a symphony of flavors at her fingertips. But what she didn't fully comprehend was that the true test was yet to come, one that wouldn't stem from a dish, but from within herself. The path ahead wove choice and intent, yet the stakes had never felt higher. Did she truly possess the fortitude to redefine her legacy amidst the weight of expectation and self-doubt? And as one chapter of her evolution began to unfold, she felt an unsettling truth surface. Her journey was only in its infancy. What awaited her just beyond this threshold hung tantalizingly close, and she found herself longing to step forward into that vast unknown. The mornings that followed felt electric with potential. Each dawn, as sunlight streamed through her kitchen window, Sarah found herself grappling with an alternating surge of inspiration and the weight of inertia. The taste of triumph still lingered in the air, yet with every stirring spoon, the flicker of self-doubt rekindled. Had she truly done enough to honor her heritage while pushing her own boundaries? Was the next dish a step forward or a retreat into the safety of past successes? Diving deep into her culinary repertoire, Sarah felt a pull towards ingredients she often shied away from, those unconventional spices that danced on the edge of overpowering. In moments of solitude, her mind conjured flavors that felt foreign yet enticing. She envisioned the smoky depths of chipotle mingling with the sharp freshness of lime. This fusion could represent her journey, grappling with what it meant to defy convention. Yet with each idea that blossomed, an accompanying voice murmured warnings. The calculation of risk stirred her apprehension. It was during one restless night, when sleep evaded her, that Sarah was struck by the notion of an experimental themed dinner, a showcase not just of her cuisine, but of her transformation. She could craft a menu titled Reclaiming Tradition, where every dish would juxtapose heritage with audacity. This wasn't merely about flavors. It was a narrative she needed to unfold for herself and those who revered her family legacy. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sarah made list after list. Ingredients were scrutinized, culinary techniques re-examined. But as she brainstormed, she found herself hesitating, a paralyzing fear creeping in. What if the dinner faltered? What if her interpretations defeated the essence of her culture? Could her family's lineage bear the weight of her ambitions? Each question clashed against her desire to assert herself, igniting a turbulent internal dialogue. The critic's earlier words echoed in her mind, urging her to push further. In a moment of defiance, she turned to her grandmother's old recipe book, its pages frayed and stained, and sought guidance. She didn't want to abandon her roots, but sought to embellish them. Days melded into nights as she meticulously crafted each dish. The kitchen transformed into her sanctuary, yet each smell carried a duality, comforting yet provocative. For every simmering pot, Sarah wrestled with emotional turmoil. Would her grandmother be proud? In her heart, she knew she had absorbed the lessons passed down through the generations. Yet, the specter of expectations loomed heavy. As the dinner day approached, Sarah's soul felt a resonance she hadn't experienced in years, a burgeoning excitement mingled with dread. She was stepping onto a precipice, set to confront her own limitations while reaching for the vast expanse of her culinary aspirations. Could she transform these scattered pieces of herself into a coherent masterpiece? That evening, while setting the dining table, reminiscing about family gatherings filled with laughter and stories, she caught a glimpse of herself in the mirror. She saw the woman fighting not just for her art, but for a generational narrative. The impending dinner represented a culmination of growth, a manifestation of all she had learned, both from tradition and from herself. It was her moment to breathe life into her journey, showcasing the delicate balance of honoring her heritage while boldly staking her claim. Yet, as she placed the final flower on the table, a devastating thought struck her. The guests were not mere patrons. They were witnesses to her untested vulnerability. If the night faltered, would they see her failure or her resolve? Unwittingly, she was standing at the cliff of her psychological threshold. The time had come to face the truth. She was not just reinventing dishes. She was redefining her identity. As night fell, she inhaled deeply, ready to embrace the expression of her truth. But just as she felt the swell of determination, her phone buzzed insistently on the counter. A new message flickered on the screen, bringing a potential game-changer. "I need to talk about an opportunity that could redefine your career." The words draped over her like a familiar blanket, comforting yet vexingly uncharted. Would this be the catalyst that could either solidify her culinary identity or scatter it across unknown horizons? Her heart raced, the next chapter looming large, awaiting her response. As the evening of reclaiming tradition finally approached, Sarah felt a surge of anxiety accompanied by a newfound resolve. She stared at the meticulously arranged dishes that adorned her table. Each plate held a story, a medley of flavors inspired by her grandmother, infused with a zest of modernity, reflecting her growth. This wasn't merely about the ingredients. It was a culinary manifesto. The guests began to arrive, laughter mingling with the warm, inviting aroma of her carefully constructed meal. Sarah could feel her heart pounding as she greeted each familiar face, enveloped in an atmosphere thick with expectation and a tinge of nostalgia. Would they appreciate the bold risks she had taken, or would she be seen as claiming a heritage she could only hope to represent? As the first course, a deconstructed jambalaya, was plated and served, Sarah watched closely for reactions. Conversations sparkled with excitement. The sound of clinking glasses and vibrant laughter wrapped around her like a warm embrace. Oddly, it sparked confidence in her core. With each passing dish, she articulated her vision between each flavor, the tapestry of her family history stitched into the present. "Remarkable fusion, Sarah," one friend exclaimed. "You've creatively reinvented these flavors." Yet, amidst the applause, doubt still clawed at her. As the main course, her grandmother's gumbo reimagined, approached the table, she felt the familiar tug of fear creep back in. Was this rendition too bold? Would those who knew her family recipes whisper of her attempt to play with tradition? The pot simmered tantalizingly, and as she ladled generous servings into bowls, a chorus of curiosity filled the air. Tense, she took a step back, heart racing. With the final plate placed, she invited the guests to dig in, holding her breath as they took their first bites. Moments felt elongated, slipping by like grains of sand through her fingers. Would they celebrate her risks or buckle under their weight? Their reactions were initially muted, forks paused midair as they absorbed each mouthful. Then, as if a switch had flipped, a wave of revelation washed over the table. "This is extraordinary," another friend exclaimed, eyes shining with delight. "You've not only captured the essence, but you've ignited a new narrative with your creativity." As Sarah stood among her guests, a simultaneous thread of pride wove through her heart. She had effectively transformed her anxiety into artistry. The gumbo, once a symbol of conflict, now danced upon the tongues of her loved ones as an embodiment of cherished legacy interlaced with her evolution. When the final plates were cleared, resounding applause echoed through the room. As they clamored for more, Sarah felt a sense of elation swell within her. This was not merely a culinary success. It was a recognition of her journey, her voice gaining validation. However, what truly resonated deeply was the unexpected praise that followed. "You've found your flair, Sarah. You've become the bridge between tradition and innovation," remarked the critic, a smile breaking across his usually stoic face. It was as if a fog had lifted, revealing the clarity she had been chasing. "You must continue to share this gift. There's a distinctive edge to your culinary approach that others need to witness," he continued. And just then, Sarah understood what he meant. Marked a turning point. It was not only validation, but an invitation to expand. With each word of encouragement, she realized the urgency of her own growth, not just in her cooking, but in her identity as a chef and storyteller, someone who encapsulated the past while bravely stepping into the unknown. Her fear transformed into a catalyst, spurring her forward with a mission. As the last guest departed, Sarah sank into a chair, bathed in the aftermath of her triumph. She had conquered her doubts. What had once felt like a risk had blossomed into discovery, an evolution fortified by confidence and creativity. Reflecting on her journey from the confines of complacency to claiming her identity, she absorbed the validation not as an end, but a beginning. She understood now that her culinary narrative would continue to flourish with each challenge she faced, an invitation for authentic expression that could whisper to others hoping to reclaim their passions. As she finally glanced down at her phone, the previously unsettling text from earlier flashed through her mind. A new opportunity awaited her, one that could evolve her culinary path even further. With vibrant determination, she smiled to herself. This was the moment she had prepared for, proving herself to not just her past, but her future. Sarah had transformed her fears into strength, showcasing authentic growth that would serve as a platform for her new endeavors. It was a new chapter, one where she would not only embrace who she was, but also inspire others to find their unique culinary voices. As she reflected on everything she had accomplished, one truth crystallized. She was ready to take the leap into the next phase of her culinary journey. And so, with an invigorated spirit and a desire to explore further, Sarah prepared to seize her opportunity, determined to carve a space that reflected not only her heritage, but also her incredible future. Now was the time to own her narrative, a powerful voice in the culinary world that demanded nothing less than recognition and respect. In this moment of satisfaction and clarity, she felt truly alive. Now her journey continued. It was just the beginning. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support truly makes a difference. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending below, and share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second.